So good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Anto Briarjo. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday to figure out what the future of smart buildings is all about. Panelists are listed on mondaylive.org. Just a reminder that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organizations. Let's remember that. Also, post your questions on the Zoom tools. I think we know that by now. And also this deck is on mondaylive.org, just in case you want any of the links on it. So we are into a new month, October. And our theme for this month is industry collaboration. We plan to have numerous discussions with people about how we as Monday Live and also the coalition can collaborate with each other to improve everything. So that's kind of the theme of this month. And our agenda, our normal news and trends chit chat, and then we have a guest from the UK, Terry Sharp, who I'll bring on shortly. He's from BCIA, which is an industry organization that's been running in the UK. We'll learn a lot more about that in a short while. But before we dive into that, Ken, what's going on in your new month?
Well, I'm following your lead and collaborating. That's the title of our October issue: Collaboration, Integration, and Education. And I think we all need to understand the complex mosaic of our collaboratory teams. And what we gain from the deep collaboration is not well understood, because when we collaborate, we inherit large pieces of well thought out, proven and tested technology evolving daily. And as an industry who in the past traditionally hasn't collaborated, we've kind of isolated ourselves from that. And I think it's a new experience for us when we collaborate. If you think of something like Uber and Google Maps, one could not exist without the other. Well, Google Maps could exist without Uber, but the Uber model is basically so interweaved with that collaboration. And I think that's the kind of thinking we have to see is when we collaborate, what value do these people bring to our presence? Our most recent collaboration was very quickly, within the last couple of weeks, we put together our 12 sessions for Las Vegas. And we have that program. We'll be presenting that in the next few days to AHR. There's a link to what we have so far, which is fairly complete. You can kind of see the direction we're going there if you click on that link. Our contributing editor, Nicholas Warren, has gone off in a direction. He has his own blog, and he's talking power to the people, and he's talking about Bitcoin and what happens if the virtual and digital realms, that's the word, becomes more important than the real world. And to all of us, that seems pretty far-fetched, but this whole idea of utilities being controlled with Bitcoin and devices actually negotiating contracts with other devices to buy services and sell energy and all of that happening behind the scenes is kind of a powerful thought. So you might want to just take a poke at some of the stuff that he's talking about there. And I've tagged a little website on the bottom called Agra Digital, which is one of my daughters involved in Australia. And what they're doing there is they're taking the whole grain market and basically turning it into a virtual purchase. And basically it's interesting how that is all built on collaboration. If everybody in the group agrees that we shall use something, not a dollar, but use I think they use Ethertherm, and everybody agrees on that, then everybody has value to the proposition. They basically put that on, and this all occurs electronically. They take a load of grain to the elevator, then they get a credit for that, and then they can go buy fertilizer. And it's just an interest. It's a whole new world, so it's worthwhile to try and get your mind around that. So lots of stuff happening, but collaboration is a powerful thought. Back to you.
Thank you. That's you're talking about collaboration between people and also between technologies, which is obviously an important thing to think about. Like when you're talking about Uber and Google Maps, it's collaboration between apps. Great. So John.
Yeah, so following along on kind of a theme I've been picking up on is, how the world of big business is viewing sustainability, reporting, et cetera. I thought this was an interesting article. Again, getting at this point of one view that the big corporations are really paying lip service, doing greenwashing. Doesn't mean that they're not contributing any value by buying offsets and credits. But this article was, more critical that, one of the most important things they can do is they have the ability to walk in the door of policymakers, and if they, big industry get behind it, it would be done, right? Legislation would be there, policy would be there. So they're all sitting on the sideline buying some credits. That's a really rough summary of the article. But I think it's interesting. Again, I'm seeing, in my day job with analytics, you look for correlations, things that line up, right? I'm seeing a lot of points on the linear regression analysis of how the world is changing its view of big companies' policies around sustainability and efficiency, et cetera. So I thought this was an interesting article. It's not a long read. I think people would enjoy reading it. So.
And this is obviously in the lead up to COP26, which is next month or December. It's coming up in Glasgow. So cool. Anno.
Yeah, interesting article in Connected RE/MAG. Just the other day, something that we're seeing in the marketplace as well. There's a huge uptick in investment in prop tech companies. I think a lot of people in our space are seeing, a lot of startups, new initiatives, new companies. There's all sorts of interesting stuff going on. And IoT is obviously part of that. But there's definitely been a big uptick just lately, as it shows here. Last point there, kind of interesting, there's a flood of institutional money into real estate industry, something that we've seen recently as well. So people are starting to see what's going on. Like the last comment there, this once unsexy overlooked space has become the darling of investors in record time. So it is a particularly unsexy space, but money changes appearances pretty quickly, right? So interesting trends going on, and I think the upshot of that is, going into 2022, 23, I think we're going to see some really interesting technologies and stuff in the prop tech market coming out. Yeah, interesting times.
Great, thank you. I think a lot of us are on AHR watch. I think everything is indicating it's going to happen as a physical event. I just got this email this morning, and it pointed out that since June, there's been 25 shows have happened since June in Las Vegas Convention Center, and 22 more are going to happen between now and January, all looking like they're all going to happen. So it's looking good for AHR. The other thing is this news that actually was passed a couple of weeks back about Boston passing new building decarbonization ordinance, which is obviously a big deal. I don't know, Jim, if you can sort of comment on this, being a Bostonian.
I think that as with many cities around the country, Boston is beginning to put real teeth into its greenhouse emissions and carbon plans going forward. We're very excited about it here locally. There's a lot of support behind it in the community, and we think it will, help drive some substance rather than greenwashing behind many of these movements. And I actually think that around the country, regulation might be the thing that saves us, because people will act when it becomes the law, and as it has here.
Great, thank you. So anybody else have any news or any issues that didn't go and get on the slide?
Yeah, a couple of quick ones. We've got our own show here in the UK called Smart Building Show, which is taking place this Wednesday, Thursday. And a number of people here are actually talking at the show. And I mean, you get many thousands there, and all the big players and lots of others are exhibiting there. And it'd be interesting, I think, also as industries moved on over the last couple of years to see the kind of attendees that go as well, rather than just the traditional guys who turn up, to see whether those that are beginning to come on the periphery, like the space guys, space optimization guys, and people in IOQ and a whole bunch of others. Be interesting to see what the attendance is like. I was also interested to just follow a little bit on Cushman and Wakefield as you kind of continue to watch repurposing of buildings, that they're talking about something called MedTail now, which is changing the retail kind of outlets and things to things like urgent care, cosmetic, medical spas, even veterinary and pet services, occupational therapy, skincare, acupuncture, and stuff like that, and kind of repurposing stores. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of empty ones, and be interesting to watch how those empty ones and how the whole industry and space gets modified over the next year or two.
MedTail.
I've heard of MedTail before.
MedTail. That's a new one on all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So if there's nobody else.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'd like to remind everybody that October is National Cybersecurity Month.
Ooh.
And just point out that cybersecurity is still a major issue, especially within our industry, and that take a look at some of the latest information about it, as far as what it can cost you and cost our clients and things like that from a financial perspective. The cost of a breach is the highest it's been in 17 years. And also that insurance, cybersecurity insurance has skyrocketed. I know one company that I was talking to the other day had a cyber security policy for it cost them roughly $30,000 a year, give or take. It has now gone up to $200,000 a year.
Ooh.
So there's lots of business ramifications behind all of this, not just the technology, and not just whether OT and IT need to be on the same network or all that kind of good stuff.
Sounds like a business opportunity to me, John. Mark?
Call me afterwards, Roger. No.
Okay, great. So I'm going to bring on Terry Sharp from the UK as a panelist here, Terry. There you go. And I'm going to stop my share. So Terry, are you there? You are still muted.
Oh, there's the mute. You got me.
Okay, so you are unmuted and we can now see you. Great. So thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a little later over there. If you could introduce yourself and also introduce the BCIA. I don't know if you prepared some slides or not. You're quite welcome to present them. But we're dying to hear what you guys have been up to in the UK, organizing the industry over there.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully you can start to see that slide deck.
Yeah, if you can put it into presentation mode, it'll be great.
That's where I'm heading. How's that one?
Okay. Perfect.
Cool. Well, that's what I look like. And as you say, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today on the subject to the Building Controls Industry Association. I've been about in this trade for a long time, and a few of us have met in the past in the physical. There's certainly some names I recognize from this esteemed panel, and a pleasure to be with you today. I'd like to propose a quick chat, and apologies for the most boring of slide decks, but I prepared it in haste, more as an aid memoir for those who couldn't be with us today, or those who are sort of recapping and looking a bit later. But perhaps a double act with my partner in crime, Roger Woodward, who has been involved in fact, is a founding member of the Building Controls Industry Association. So Roger, please chip in and as we go through this little story.
Will do.
Thank you. Well, our story starts about, well, where are we now? I suppose the story starts 30 years ago with some controls manufacturers who got together, probably in a bar, being British, and were moaning at each other about the state of the industry, and decided that they would put their heads together. And so what started as a simple and humble group has over 30 years merged and morphed and grown into being over 130 member companies, employers. And those companies have a major interest in the commercial control and BMS sector. So what started with the big names, the Honeywell, the Siemens, the Johnson Controls, of those originals back when I started, that we had the Stafer in Europe too. Nowadays, the Siemens organizations. Part of that big four has gradually diversified and encouraged in those days what started as the control panel manufacturers and the contractors. And now, of course, the major sector in Europe is the way that we go to market are the independent system integrators and master system integrators too. But the group has grown in power and strength and integrity, as I say, to 130 members nowadays, and represents 80% of the controls market by value and by pound. And we'll come on to talk a bit more about some numbers and figures a bit later, because that's one of the main things that we managed to achieve.
It was initially interesting, Terry, wasn't it, that there was a huge pushback at the time by the manufacturers to allow system integrators in, because they actually saw them obviously as competitors in those days, but they are now the overwhelming majority in the association.
Yes, and that's right, Roger. And I think there was almost a snobbery at those days too, because the contractors didn't have access to the technology that the manufacturers had. And the manufacturers saw themselves as aloof and better, and the system integrators really had to fight their way into the marketplace from their humble origins as being the controls contractors and the installation specialists. But as an association, as a team, and setting out, and perhaps this is a list of dreams and wishes, but with some practical wins along the way, but to be the single voice representing our specialist industry. And we are quite unique, aren't we, in what we do? We're quite high tech applied to dirty buildings using muddy water going down the pipe. And how do you explain that at a dinner party? But our objectives there are to give that unified voice of the industry and to be recognized as such. And we've very much achieved that with some of our help and liaisons with much larger organizations. Our version of the leading company is CIBSE, the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, which is the perhaps the building consultants is a much greater and more powerful organization. And the controls BCIA has managed to punch above its weight. Well, that's what we set out to do. And most recently, down the bottom there, we recognized that there was a skills shortage within our industry. We weren't attracting, and we certainly weren't training new talent for our industry. And perhaps when we reflect on the last and changes over the last sort of 20, 30 years or so, trainees came from those manufacturers that did those turnkey systems, and those big 4-6 players that we were household names that we think of immediately had training centers and apprenticeship colleges and training academies in-house, where school leavers almost would do a 3 or 4 year apprenticeship and come out and be the technicians of the future, and would then work through the ranks. As our industry in Europe has changed and it had become a bit more fragmented with the systems installers doing the majority of those turnkey installations. The manufacturers themselves are now the product supplier, the box shifting entities, and no longer have those training academies. And I think that that's what's caused the lack of training and lack of training resource. And we've had to address that within our Controls Industry Association. So in recent times, we've developed and specified an apprenticeship program. Apprenticeship covers both experienced workers as well as those joining straight from college. And we've specified what training and conditions it will be from an employer as well as the employee and the trainee's perspective, to give a career pathway to a much wider audience. So it might be someone that studied initially as an electrical engineer or has moved from IT or telecoms or other allied industries that can now go on a structured training regime to achieve a pathway to become a BEMS engineer. So how as an association do we work and how do we achieve it? When it sets out with, we're made up of usual working groups and committees, as you would expect, and governed by elected committees at the top, a management committee and some presidents and what have you, as well as the sort of working groups, the chairs of committees there do that coordination as you'd expect, and those various functions take care of the activities. What's not shown there and has been key to our success and comes from that we are funded wholly by our membership and membership subscriptions. And converting this in my head as we go into dollars, but it's about $1,500 US to join the association as a small or medium system integrator. And that goes on a sliding scale dependent upon turnover up to the likes of Honeywell and Siemens. It will pay about $10,000 a year for their membership subscription. And that enables us to finance and to function. And the benefits that come out of it, we'll talk about it in a moment. But we employed an executive officer. It's a permanent appointment. It's not a full-time position. He works typically 2 days per week for the association. He takes care of all the secretariat functions, all the administration, and all of the organizing. And he's the one that really takes care and manages the trade association on behalf of the membership. Our other two key specialist organizations is a PR company, which takes care of most of our awards and external and marketing facing functions, and an analyst who collates our turnover figures. And we'll come back to talk about that in a moment. But we have about working groups, and typically they meet 3 times annually, and smaller groups of people. Progress is inversely proportional to the number of people on the committee. But smaller working groups spin out of these to take care of particular actions and activities, like what would be an opinion, what would be a technical paper, a white paper, a standard specification, and so on. The association is very keen to be sort of generic and not biased to any particular manufacturer or standards of doing things. And so it is an association for the industry's benefit. And the industry is the employers and the employees and all of us associated with it. But it is not biased to any particular standards, even communication standards, protocols, or what have you. So what have we done 30 years? What have we got to show for it? Well, I said we employed an analyst. And what the association anonymously, and the members pool their sales revenues and their sales channels each quarter. And this has enabled us to build up a picture of trends. And most importantly, it is trends to the specific value. We know fairly accurately because our membership represents about 80% of the marketplace. There's always the others, the other channel, that 20% and some in-house activity and the like. But we can start to see quite accurate trends. In recent times, we can see what happened because of lockdown and COVID activity. But as we spin out of COVID now, we can start to see financially our recovery and also our sales channel recovery, how additional work is being generated in the end user sector as we're reconfiguring buildings to give us increased ventilation, more occupancy control, and other smart technology that we're applying to reconfigure those automation and air conditioning plant. The lack of recirculation or recuperation, for instance. So a very strong feature and benefit of membership has been having access to that sales revenue and those market analysis. We spoke about the problems of training, and the association has really, as recently, had government approval for its BEMS apprenticeship. And so we're launching that, a 3-year training program, formally documented, where employers can assign their young staff and their up-and-coming engineers of the future to go through this training program and achieve safety, technical, theoretical, as well as hands-on and practical experience throughout the 3-year term. So something as an association that we're particularly proud of and very live and fresh at the moment as we're recruiting our second wave.
I think, Sarah, it's also important to point out it also covers all sorts of things like HVAC fundamentals, not just BAS or BEM stuff. It's actually covering the whole spectrum of buildings and building automation.
Yeah, it's very true, Roger. When we start to break down and think about what is it that a BEMS engineer needs to do, well, of course, he's a master of many different disciplines. He needs to have a good grounding and understanding of everything from the theories of thermodynamics right through to the applications of refrigeration machinery, how the boilers work and so on, and what are the control parameters and restrictions of each different types of those equipment too. So it's a very comprehensive program with 15 courses available at the moment, and that is continuing to grow. We're adding commercial courses of how to work in sales and different features and what the QSs and quantity surveyors and valuations, and how do the commercial aspects of our industry work too.
I know a few mature people that could actually benefit from that as well, Sarah, who've been in the industry for a while.
Yeah, every day is a school day. But the company that we're using on delivery to achieve some of the administrative functions of it in other disciplines, not our own, but they tell me that they have apprentices ranging from the age of 16 years old to 65 years old. They have a 65-year-old apprentice. So a bit of a mindset change there about how we do things a bit different. But some other accreditations and achievements down there of successfully being approached by government, European government and UK government on building regulations and European standards for energy technologies and government technology lists. Our members tell us why they want to join and why they want to be part of the association, and I think that it's adding certainly kudos onto the side of the van and the letterhead. It's implying to the marketplace that they're kept up to date with technology, and that as an association, the BCIA are doing something right. Finally, we'd like to party, us controls engineers, don't we? And we only last month celebrated a conference and our awards dinner, which was a fine networking event. In the UK, about 500 of us gather at our Prestige conference hotel in Birmingham, in the centre of the UK, for a highlight of the controls industry. So it's a black tie dinner with many of the leaders and a great opportunity for networking. So as we're talking about networking and partying and some of the things that we've managed to overcome over the years, let me just try and stop my share for a second and see if I can switch screen. Are you seeing that yet? Not.
We're not seeing anything.
Not seeing anything, no. I was trying to share a PowerPoint slide just to show you some of the data that we got from our results, but that's not been successful. But just to show some graphs, which I'll import into the slide deck when we put that up to Monday Live, so I'll add a slide onto that one. But many of the obstacles that we've overcome over the years, very much in the theme of collaboration we've been talking about today, was about how the modern way is to much more working together. We're refreshed when we get on site and we see young engineers quite prepared to share tips and share software. At my age and my generation, that information was power, wasn't it? And if we had a tip or a handy trick, we certainly didn't tell anybody about it, because that gave us a bit of extra leverage and gave us some specialisms. Nowadays, the youngsters, I was going to almost say the kids, don't think in the same way. It's much more open and collaborative and communicative. And how can my BMS interface with your refrigeration machine? How can we break down those seams and achieve that overall control objective so much better? And very much what we're keen to see and enjoy. I think it's a whole new world on collaboration and integration, both with the technology, but with the people also. Good. I see we've got some questions down the bottom of the slides.
There's this one question from David. You were referring to UK and EU. He was asking about Brexit, whether that's to what extent did that impact you? And I kind of want to extend that a little bit. Are you just UK, or do you do anything outside of the UK? It's kind of related to that.
The trade association is focused upon the UK. Many of our members are household names and international players. Mm-hmm. So of course we do that. But as a trade association, we're focused upon our home market predominantly. Of course, we have influence, and until quite recently, we're part of Europe too. And the second part to that question, how has Brexit affected our labour? Of course, it will have. We've had some labour which has returned home to Europe, and that has been not just across the spectrum of ability to. In particular, we see industries most heavily hit, including retail and hospitality, and tending to be the lower grades of labour which we were dependent upon, from agriculture and farming to dependent upon from low-grade labour coming from Eastern Europe. And those industries have been hit. And I'm sure that will have had some effect on the controls business too.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up to the group. Interesting what you've accomplished in 30 years. I think I may have attended one of your events when I was still living in the UK in the 90s. But
I think you did, and I think that's where we came across.
Yeah, I think, but one other thing I think also to cover, Terry, is that, and I think we've covered it a lot on Money Live, it's how do you encourage younger people to try and, to enter the industry. And one of the things the BCI tries to do, and which I think they're beginning to get some success, is, as Terry touched upon, is, it's not, kind of the guy there with the wrench or anything else. It's actually a technology that touches many areas, including IT these days, and is now looked upon as something that younger kids should actually get involved with. But bearing that in mind, it's important, as Terry pointed out with the training, that they understand also the fundamentals as well as the sexy part of it, to actually make sure they get a full grounding on what the industry does. But it's trying to lift the image of the industry. And I think that open approach has, and it was really quite interesting when it started, that, as Terry indicated, that the controls manufacturers are treated very much as a closed shop. It was their trade association and repelled all borders. But actually, as the system integrators have come in and other industries are joined that are associated with the controls industry, sharing and I think working with one another has really opened up, and people are recognizing that we've all got similar problems, which include the commercial payment terms and what the industry should look like. And I think it's really benefiting from that collaborative approach.
Yeah, just to sort of build on that, Roger and Terry. Hey, Terry, it's Anna. I was kind of fascinated with your comments about the younger folk being more open with their, their skills and engineers. And like you, I was of the era where knowledge was power and you kept it all to yourself, right? And I think I think a lot of it is to do obviously with the change in how we interact socially with social platforms and stuff as well. That's opened up. But that's actually, I see that as a big positive sign, right? In that going forward, younger folk are a lot more collaborative in sharing knowledge and ideas. And I see that within our own team and our own organization. The guys that we've got on board, younger guys are really good sharing, cross-sharing information, which is a big mindset change.
Yeah, and the interesting, I know, is that at the award ceremony, two of the biggest awards are the best training outfit, which tends to be either an MSI or another sort of systems integrator organization rather than manufacturer. But one of the biggest awards is Young Engineer of the Year,
Right.
which is great, and everybody kind of really puts, there's a lot of entrants for that, which is really great news.
Yeah, across the board in those awards, and there are, from my memory, approaching 10 categories, but I think there is 130 different entrants. It's certainly a heavy day's work for the judging committee, which sit down and do that anonymously. And now that's moving to more online. But yeah, very great success, overcome obstacles over the years, and even in recent times with corporate compliance and non-compete and ethics and integrity policies. So some of the large employers get a bit twitchy when we talk about trade associations and working with our competitors and on common problems and issues, but we've managed to surmount those. I see in the chat too, it's a question from Pete Scandon about a couple of specific examples of where we've helped shape the UK or European policy. But the ISO standard 15232 was shaped out of a working group in Europe called CEN, TC247, which was a bit of a joke for Roger and I because it took 15 years to get some momentum and finally come into fruition. But the building controls industry was involved in the authoring and compilation of that right from the outset. Although a major delegation from it were from Siemens in Germany, but the UK was certainly represented and consulted. And only this year we were consulted too with European government and the British Standards Institution, authoring on behalf of Europe as that is up for revision after 5 years. And also there was a second example of UK legislation. We have an energy technology list, an ETL, with where energy saving technologies and equipment is approved and listed by government. And we've been working upon revisions to achieve that. For example, there are government grants and we can depreciate investment in inverter drives, for example, and depreciate them and recover those costs in 1 year for tax incentive reasons. And we've been working to have building automation technology added into those lists. So I hope, Pete, that's answered your questions, a couple of things which were specific.
So I guess turning it around, Anto, and to the rest of the panel, here now we're actually seeing that the big controls guys. I mean, the UK is a little bit ahead, I think, of its time in the fact that sort of 75% of the systems are actually installed by system integrators as opposed to manufacturers. But in the US, do you actually see the manufacturers now across the board getting closer and more collaborative with system integrators, or is there still a them and us situation?
Who can tackle that one?
You're not normally that shy, guys.
Yeah, maybe Jim or Mark Peacock.
Mark's not going first. I'll take a stab at it. Maybe yes. Mark, go ahead.
No, Jim, go ahead. I'll follow your lead, pal. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that if you look at the channel structure in the US right now, there are very many independent channels. What you see is really a bifurcation of the market according to the complexity and size of buildings. So the traditional large manufacturers are still on the what we call the A account verticals, which are healthcare, higher education, pharmaceutical and life sciences, government, and military, a large institutional real estate owners. And you'd find that the branch offices from the manufacturers typically have deep sway into that area. Then you have a large fraction of the market, most of the buildings in the market that are smaller commercial real estate frequently, or other types of buildings, not institutional real estate. And that is dominated by an independent channel right now. So I think that, I don't know if everyone else sees it that way, but that's how I see it. And I think so that smaller building channel, it probably is much closer to the UK model. And the larger companies are still tightly bound in those large accounts.
I would agree in general, Jim, to what you said, but where I see some differences starting to occur is truly with the master system integrator, in which they are now getting major opportunities where they might have been directed or whatever from one of the manufacturers. So I see that as a little bit change in the marketplace going forward. And also, at one time, the branch offices of the major manufacturers were extremely, extremely active. And while many still are, I don't see, at least over the last 2 years, I haven't seen where they have been as active as in days past for whatever reasons. And again, talking to our channel and talking to a lot of the manufacturers, is that I think they're starting to rely on the system integrator, independent system integrator force more and more than ever before. So
I think the reason for that, Mark, is just vicious cost cutting that's taken place in those branch organizations over the last 20 years. I think they're more organizations than they were.
Yep, good point.
And there's a number of reasons here. I mean, obviously the system integrators are more agile and more cost competitive. But when I tell you that, Siemens no longer does turnkey projects, and the other 2 or 3 that are left have very small sales teams, but they're kind of dependent on the aftermarket and locking in the customer, which is, they're seeing that service and maintenance go away, and that's kind of killing them. I think will finally kill them off. But the whole even consultants and everyone actually just are not accepting that they're open anymore. And it's interesting to see that when they all started out on this journey of the cloud, they all opened up initially with, hey, it's a Honeywell cloud or a Johnson cloud or whatever else, and now they're talking more freely about, okay, we'll sit on Azure or Google Cloud or AWS. And I honestly believe that at some stage we will see the manufacturers pulling out of turnkey projects. I just don't think they can compete. And the bigger jobs are, there's some system integrators that turn over here more than the manufacturers in terms of turnkey projects now. And they're all members from both sides in the BCIA. And out of interest, the acceptance of that is quite interesting, because the actual training course when it was initiated was donated by Siemens. They actually gave some, the core bit. I mean, the BCIA built on it hugely, but they helped kind of kick the thing off. So it kind of shows, the collaborative approach they've got to now compared with where they used to be.
I had a question I wanted to offer. Part of our theme throughout Money Live on a couple of occasions have been to focus on the need for education and the education. We tried to compile lists of all the different ways people could get into this industry. And we came up with a pretty big list, right? Which may be one of the challenges. And I just wanted to ask, do you feel that through BCIA you have a consolidation of the training opportunity, or is this one of 50 like we encountered here? Right there, I would say we didn't find anyone that was dominant or had significant market weight as this is where you go to come into this industry. I was wondering if it might be different over there.
Yeah, we have a regime in the UK called Trailblazer, and this regime is a government initiative, and it certifies and says that you're an employer of bona fide apprentices. And so you can have some tax incentives and concessions because you're training young people. And so rather than addressing the issue of where these trainees start from, the BCIA decided that they would address the skills they would have at the end of the apprenticeship program. So after 3 or 4 years, what skills and experience would these guys have? We said that we would give concessions and we would recognize prior learning. So yes, we all came here from different directions, and some of the mature students transferring from electrical or communications or other trades can simply claim exemption from having to do that formal study because they've got prior learning or prior experience to take account of. So the 15 courses that we set out over a 3-year period and a course could be 1 to 7 or 8 days of duration from memory. Some of the courses are purely classroom, some of them are workshop too, some of them are practical. And in between the studied formal courses, the students are expected to evidence learning. And back to the collaboration thing, perhaps we're needing to show some skills in the manufacture or testing of control cabinets. And perhaps my firm doesn't make control cabinets, we buy in that work. And so there is an ongoing need for that further collaboration, isn't it? Of, I've got a young engineer, can I send him to your place for a couple of weeks so that he can conclude his studies? And this level of collaboration, again, we're expecting to see. But John, to the issue, it's not about where the guys came from, it's about what rounded skills that we want them to have at the end of it. And so that's how we tackled that question, and accrediting and recognizing prior learning.
So in effect, BCIA as an organization has a greater visibility of the breadth of skills that's necessary than a particular manufacturer that's focused on a particular thing. That's partly what you're saying, right?
Basically what I'm saying, yes, in days, I think that the trade association, many minds were better than one. And I think that we got our heads together, we approached different manufacturers. We had the top end guys looking at the software, working with those field level specialists. So we had the tech companies with those the valve and actuator specialists, and because the controls engineer of the future needs to have an appreciation of all of those. And the panel and the install and the electrical testing. And electrical safety is very important too. In the nature of our work, we need to work on live equipment, unfortunately, and that has its inherent hazards. So safe working is very key and very early on in the training program.
What is the relationship that you have with building owners and end users as an association?
With not as strong as we would like. We're trying to encourage more controls engineers and more individuals within those building owners to join us too. Right at the start, I said that we were an employers organization, 130 member companies. But we have a new category of membership called associate membership, which is maybe that if we have a bank or a big institution or multi-location or large enough to justify having energy management and controls and capability in-house, I think that individual ought to be able to join our trade association too and ought to benefit from the skills and knowledge sharing. So that's why we invented associate members.
Sounds great. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about here on Monday Live is that a lot of the building trade going forward is on the operating portion of the building, not just the construction portion. That's why, you know, some kind of intercourse with those end use engineers is particularly important and will probably become more important as we see value propositions like cybersecurity or enterprise management, which are really life cycle costing issues rather than construction issues.
Totally agree, Jim. We had a strapline a couple of years ago of 10-80-10, where 80% of the effort on operating costs during the life and operating of the building, 10% of construction, 10% in decommissioning at the end of its life. But it's trying to engage with those end users. Our common enemy of the controls industry is the mechanical contractor. The way the buildings are procured by the lowest cost kind of means that we get beat up for the term called value engineering, which is what features can I strip out in order to make my bid, to make my loss-making bid a profitable contract. And as specialist subcontractors to the M&E throughout that procurement chain, we're often that victim. So if we can engage with that building owner and he can seize benefits of the intelligence that we're putting in and sophistication, which is all too often an after purchase, an end user sale once the building is occupied. If we can engage with them earlier, we save that double cost.
So, Terry, you've mentioned in passing sort of IT and cybersecurity, but you haven't really sort of emphasized in those sort of data and analytics side of things. Is that something that is the members of BCIA considers part of what BCIA is covering, or is that something that's emerging? Could you speak to where that is in comparison to all the other skills and issues?
Yeah, certainly it is right at the fore of everybody's mind, but it's a huge topic to tackle. And I think that we're still kicking it around the park at the moment, trying to decide what to do, is my honest opinion to it. We have lots of IT standards already in the marketplace, cybersecurity standards, which are forever evolving, and we tend to be slipstreaming on those. But it is something that certainly the manufacturers are very key with, and the installers, of course, need to comply with. But I can't think we can put our finger on what is the problem until we can define that. We don't have a solution in mind.
So I was going to ask, I know that you've been attending Monday Live for at least 2-3 weeks, something like that, and obviously Roger's been involved with us. We are now partnering with the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, which is a coalition that's been stood up. We talked a lot about that in the last couple of months. Have you seen, maybe it's a comment as much for Roger as well as you, Terry, have you seen enough of that, and can you draw any kind of comparison with what that coalition is trying to do versus the sort of the BCIA?
Roger, do you want to first stab at that?
Yeah, sure. I think we're seeing less of a drive than you are with the whole Biden administration. There's always been an energy driven part of financing and helping people, but I think, as we all know on the call here, is that unfortunately, you know, energy people tend to pay lip service to it. So there's not always that much beyond some sort of incentives for a year or so to actually do something. And it does switch between technologies. You know, it could be solar panels one day, and it could be building, you know, energy management systems the next. But I think our government is less, can I say, active than I'm seeing with you guys at the moment. Clearly, with Biden coming in, it's a new initiative, and there's a lot of push behind it. I don't think we're actually seeing that sort of level of interest. We've always had a steady sort of thing, but it's always been built around energy, I would say, Terry, more than anything else. Although they have brought in new legislation, which was helped push by the BCIA, to say that buildings up to a certain size now must have a building automation system, must have a building control system. I forget what the square meters are, or square footage. Maybe you know, Terry, but this goes down quite low now. So there's kind of that thing that we've been trying to push. But in terms of the activity or the sort of coding with the government, it's not been that sort of easily bridged from anybody in the industry.
I remember the number as 10,000 square feet, Roger, and I remember 50 kilowatts of heating. But that's my reference. Following on from what you've said too there about energy, yes, we've had the same lip service, and greenwashing is the latest buzzword we're hearing. But I think that post-COVID, we're seeing in the UK shortages of road fuel, of petrol and petroleum and diesel. We've got queues at the high street. We've got energy companies and supply organizations going bust. We've got a bit of an energy crisis going on, and there is threat all over our newspapers and breakfast TV about energy costs for this coming winter. And in many ways, always looking for a benefit. I think that's going to be good for our trade. It doesn't matter that how cheaply that we're buying things. The ultimate green initiative must be to use less of it. And I think that we're well placed to do that automatically and behind the scenes. Applying buildings and technology, okay, that's what we do, isn't it? Use less energy. So in a way, that this post-COVID energy crisis may well be helping our trade and our profession.
There's a quick question here from David asking about Big C and ASHRAE and their respective influence in smart building standard. Obviously, ASHRAE is more US and Big C is, maybe you can explain a little bit about Big C, because most people in the US won't know what Big C is.
I think you mean CIBSE. Do you mean? I think you mean CIBSE.
CIBSE, yeah, sorry, yeah, of course.
CIBSE.
CIBSE, a huge organisation in the UK of engineering standards organisation. An acronym is the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers. So it tends to be that, as it says that, an individual membership institution that's very powerful in driving building services engineering standards. So perhaps the UK equivalent of ASHRAE. As such, as an institution, as it is an academic style of institution, very influential on its papers and having its papers adopted as becoming sort of industry standards. Simply rely upon.
Did they involve themselves with standards, for example, communications type standards or other sort of information related standards?
No, they don't. More than the electrical and mechanical standards, more the mechanical engineering standards actually coming out of CIBSE. Electrical standards come out of another institution of electrical engineers. And so, as you see, we're not short of institutions in the UK and academia and different policies and standards. The difficulty from our trade is knitting them all together. The Building Controls Industry Association, the BCIA, contribute to CIBSE's work in any controls and technology forums. They recognise us as being the voice of that smart buildings network and very much include us at every opportunity.
So does anybody have any last question that they're dying to ask?
Has there been any thoughts on turning this into a global operation rather than just focused on the UK? Have you ever had that chat?
We'd be delighted to help you form your own. I'm not sure that you need us, or that we are a not-for-profit organisation owned by its membership. And we'd be delighted to spin off and tell you what we do. You can pick up the good bits and ignore the bad bits. But yeah, if there's a need for something like this in the US, we'd be delighted to help you and collaborate and tell you what we got wrong.
I think that's what we can get out of this. And next week we actually have BIG, which is the Building Intelligence Group. That's maybe more akin to what BCIA is in terms of structure, because it's distributed. So it'll be interesting to hear that conversation. So with that, I think we've come to the top of the hour. Thank you very much, Terry and Roger as well. It's been great. Really sort of great insight of what you guys have done in the UK. It's quite phenomenal. I love the quarterly report thing. I'm not sure that could ever work in the US.
Well, again, it took us a bumpy ride to get here, but then it's done anonymously. We use an external analyst, so we all pull our data to him, and he doesn't share any individual results. He shares the total output, so we can monitor the trend, and we know our personal contribution to that trend.
Yeah.
But just imagine having that power as we switch from three-way control valves to pressure-independent control valves, and being able to monitor that type of trend. That's seeing how much more end user sales we do past COVID than contractor sales.
Yeah.
It's real powerful information.
Might be useful, Terry, to actually, if you can, on your slides, just to put a couple, I know you couldn't show it, but a couple of examples of the sort of data that comes out of the trade association, because it really is useful and everybody does refer to it. And I think that's seen as invaluable to all the members.
Certainly, Roger, I plan to do that. I'll attack a couple of these graphs onto the slide deck and whiz that over to you, Anto.
Thank you very much. And Brad has just posted a comment. Brad is the guy that'll be with us next week talking about BIG. So I'll make an introduction between you guys and Brad and his group, so you can collaborate on that front. So with that, we'll bring this to a wrap. Thank you very much again, and thanks everybody, and thanks the audience. And we'll get the video up on YouTube tomorrow, and we'll be back next week for another Monday Live. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.